Hey everyone, this is Kalegi with Tim Moore reminding you that SportsSpeak is now powered by SeatGeek. SeatGeek is the one-stop shop for tickets to sporting events, concerts, and so much more.
Use the promo code SportsSpeak at checkout for $20 off your first purchase.
SeatGeek, let there be live. Now, on to the show. Hello, everybody, and welcome to another edition of SportsSpeak. I'm back and here with you, SportsSpeak powered by SeatGeek. Promo code SportsSpeak, one word, all caps, 20% off your first purchase. I'm Kalegi.
And I'm Tim Moore.
Got a lot to talk about. Again, October is one of the more exciting months in sports, and excited to be sort of breaking down what's been going on these last couple of weeks here with you on our 152nd episode. Shout out to Alec Krauthamel for holding down the fort with Tim last week. We're going to dive into the Major League Baseball playoffs. Upsets aplenty. Is there a problem with the format? We're going to get into the NBA as well briefly. James Harden not with the Sixers. He's currently in Houston. We react. NFL, Eagles and Niners go down. Giants, how does Tim feel at 1-5? We'll talk about that, but we have to start with SportsSpeak Fantasy because I think now there's a hit against the people from Rutgers because there are 4 people from Rutgers in this league. It's me, it's Alec, it's Tropper, and it's Brett, and we're a combined 5-19 through the first 4 weeks, and it's just a complete disaster.
It's a complete disaster for you guys, but I'd argue you deserve it the most with that trade you made to Tropper because of the fact that I want to say you ultimately finessed him, and the fact that you still have one win to me is absolutely mind-numbing to say the least. But we know this week for sure, unless there is a tie, there will only be 2 one-win teams left going into next week.
Yeah, and I'm probably going to be one of them because I thought I was going to get Jaylen Warren, and then somehow I guess I screwed up the waivers thing. So I got Zach Evans, which, you know, in any other league, that'd be a good move because you got him and now he's here. The problem is with the way this gimmick league is, then I'm stuck with him until the Rams bye. And if I want to stick with him beyond that, then that's a tough decision to make because once Kyron Williams is back around week 10, week 11, maybe Zach Evans isn't even playing that well. Who knows if he's even going to play that much? I took a flyer on DeMarcado from the Cardinals in 2 leagues. That did not work out. So I have, hesitations about Evans. So I was hoping maybe I'll get Jaylen Warren. He's consistently getting 10 to 12 points. And then I don't know what I did, but somehow I didn't get him on my roster. And of course, the team I'm playing, which is Alec, now has Jaylen Warren on his team.
Well, you know what I don't understand? I put in a waiver claim for Deontay Johnson. I don't understand how nobody picked up Deontay Johnson. There was other teams this week that had wide receivers on buys or did so ever. So I took advantage because the Jets are on a bye. Actually, I don't think I dropped down Lazard. Actually, I think it was Michael Gallup. It was either Gallup or Lazard. But either way, Cowboys on a bye as well. I think it was Gallup. Either way, the point is I dropped Michael Gallup, and I ultimately picked up Deontay Johnson, who's coming back off IR this week. And now I have both Pickens and Deontay Johnson that I can look forward to on figuring out who I want to take off the bench. But my problem this season, I am too stacked in receiver position. As we saw in the draft episode, I had a meltdown because I could not draft a running back. Running back is still my weakness. Dalvin Cook, unfortunately, has not worked out at all. He sat on my bench the entire time. When I look at the rest of my running back core, I mean, it's relatively inconsistent. I have 2 top 15 quote unquote running backs, Brian Robinson Jr., of course. And oh goodness, who's my other one? Goodness. I don't even remember who my other running back is. This is no bad. Alexander Madison. Mr. I can't hold on to the football. There we go. Thankfully, he's been playing good the last few weeks, but I mean, more touches, I guess, now that Justin Jefferson's on IR. But I'm 5-1. I'm leading Eastern on the West side. Of course, I think the best team right now in the league until injuries happen or some chaotic thing happens. Tyler Glass dominating the Western side. I don't want to say if there's something out for you Rutgers guys, but I mean, I just view it as you got to get lucky sometimes to not get injuries. And if you're someone like Alec, for example, who literally has had everybody on his roster hurt at some point already in this season, and we're only 6 weeks through of an 18-week season, you can only do so much. I mean, I feel bad. The dudes had to put 6 different guys at one point on IR, cut them, do whatever. it's just been a mess for absolutely Alec. But with that being said, he also doesn't have the least points scored. Tropper just cannot score offensively with his fantasy team.
I mean, when you draft the Browns in the second round for your defense for some reason, that's bound to happen. I know their defense has been pretty good this year, but the second round
for him, I would argue that
yeah.
it's paying off. And well, you ended up getting Zach Ertz, and I guess you kind of saved him. His first overall pick was Zach Ertz, was it not?
I think it was.
And he's on your roster.
Yeah.
He traded his first. Oh my goodness.
Yeah, it was part of the whole. It was part of the trade.
Either way, it doesn't matter. Listen, this is what I also explained earlier. So what if you guys are battling for last right now? Of course, you want to be in the playoffs. You want to battle for the championship. But as long as you're not last the last 3 weeks of the playoffs, that's all that matters. Your goal is to not go to the toilet bowl, as I like to say. As long as you're not battling for the bottom in the playoffs, that's all that matters. For example, I'll give another example. Brett. Brett's just kind of having an season, right? He started off 2-0. He's lost 4 straight games, 2-4, but he's not a one-win team. He's just kind of there down the middle. As long as he has a moderate rest of the season, he's not going to be in the toilet bowl picture, even if he doesn't make the playoffs.
We'll see what happens, but it is not going well for me. And this is after last year when I came so close to making the playoffs and then disaster struck in that Monday Night Football game. And now, by the way, Kyler Murray is off the PUP list. So after everything that happened with Kyler Murray costing me a playoff spot, now we're in a situation where he's going to be back on the field in the NFL very soon.
And if I could say one more thing too, Zoe is on her revenge tour, right? She lost the first 2 games of the season, has won every game since. Surprisingly, I don't know how I ended up beating Anthony last week. Or what am I saying? Oh, I'm having a meltdown. Bellows, thank you. Because you know why I'm thinking of the other league, are the one that we have with Aiden.
Mm-hmm.
Evangelista's in the other league, I'm pretty sure. But either way, that's not the point. The point is that overall, Bellows ends up falling to me. He was the 1 seed 2 weeks ago. He's now lost 2 straight games. How about Ryan Mineker? Give him some credit, mister. I couldn't win more than 2 games last season drafting a quarter of the Broncos roster. He's in a playoff picture currently as a 6 seed. And of course, Drew was having a very quiet season as well. Drew played in the toilet bowl game last season after being nowhere near the worst team throughout most of the season.
That's what scares. I know. And you say it's unpredictable and it doesn't matter until week 17, but that's why I'm scared, because I can't trust my team. But I can trust the Philadelphia Eagles. And let's get into the NFL here. Now, there's no more unbeatens. The 70s Dolphins, they stand to live for another year. The 49ers just simply got too banged up in that game. I think they're going to be fine. Debo and McCaffrey did not suffer long-term injuries. The defense is still elite. And if Jake Moody didn't shank that kick, they would have won the game anyway. So 49ers, I don't think there's much to discuss there. Now the Eagles. The Eagles had a bad game, and I understand that. But there's a couple things to consider. Number one, I just want to say, Tim, you are perfect for the first 6 weeks of your Eagles picks because you had them winning the first 5 and losing to the Jets. I don't think you pictured them losing to Zach Wilson specifically, but that's the way it goes. And to be honest, they did not lose to Zach Wilson. They lost to the Jets defense and Breece Hall. That's who they lost to. The Eagles are going to be fine. Everybody is jumping the gun here. And I've heard Cowboys fans, I've heard Giants fans, and I've heard Jets fans starting this whole sort of rhetoric that all of a sudden Jalen Hurts is a system quarterback. Jalen Hurts has played completely fine every other game. And there's another stat I want to throw out here. Shout out the Pat McAfee show. Josh Allen had his horrible game in week 1. Who was that against? The New York Jets defense. Patrick Mahomes went 18 for 30, 203 yards, 2 picks in week 4 against the Jets defense. Jalen Hurts struggled. Guess who? The Jets defense. So elite quarterbacks are being puzzled by the New York Jets defense. And I know the Jets were a little down at secondary, but that's not really what was giving the Eagles problems. It was Jalen Hurts not having time in the pocket because the offensive line was banged up, and the Jets defensive line and their edge rushers are really, really good. So give credit where credit is due. It is not all on Jalen Hurts. Also on the other side of the field, The Eagles are extremely injured on defense, much like they were in 2021. Their secondary is now down 6 players. It was down 3. They lost 3 more. So they are in a lot of trouble there. They had Bradley Roby from the practice squad, and he gets hurt. Everybody's getting injured. So this whole sort of argument that Jalen Hurts is suddenly this problem who's been exposed and is just a benefit and a product of the Eagles system. Calm down. It's one game. People have bad weeks. Football is a week-to-week sport. I think the Eagles are going to be fine in the long term. What I will say, though, is they're in a tough spot heading into this weekend against the Dolphins because their secondary is now injured to heck, and you're going to have to face off with Tyreek Hill. So you could be in some trouble there. But Philadelphia, one game is not going to kill them. And hey, shout out to the Jets. They are 3-3 now with Zach Wilson at quarterback. I think even if Aaron Rodgers was healthy, with the way the schedule was, knowing you played Philly, Buffalo, KC, and Dallas in the first 6 weeks, with a healthy Rodgers, I think you would have been at least content with 3-3. And even with the backup, you're still 3-3. So credit to the Jets on a great win, but I think people are overreacting about both the Eagles and the Niners, especially Philly.
Yeah, well, obviously, I'm going to start with the Eagles. And I do want to talk about the Jets briefly at the end of my point. But, I can understand why people are saying maybe Hurts is a system quarterback just because of the perspective of the fact that when you can't get his feet going and he's got to sit back in the pocket, similar to another quarterback that's much less talented, Justin Fields, um, you kind of get, and even Lamar Jackson for the record too, they kind of get stuck into a situation. The Jets brought pressure. Unfortunately for the Eagles, you can't do much when your best offensive tackle, Lane Johnson, gets hurt. Another thing too that you didn't mention about injuries, this team also lost Quez Watkins. Now they're going to add Julio Jones. That's going to be another receiver depth piece who I truly think still has some sort of potential late in his career to do something. I think Philly's a good fit for him. Let's just hope he ends up working out. But when it comes down to the Eagles, I honestly feel that they're going to be fine. But I would be amiss to say that through the first 4 or 5 weeks of the season, looking at the offense, it is not what it was last year. I would argue it got better in the running back position with DeAndre Swift, in my opinion, who still blows my mind how, until there was an injury to Kenneth Gainwell, wasn't the starter this season. He's absolutely been nothing shy of impressive. But you know what I really do dumb it down to, Eddie, if I'm going to be truthfully honest with you, is that, yes, you've seen production from A.J. Brown, right? You've seen your production from the receiver end. But what's happened to Dallas Goedert? Why is Dallas Goedert, who was the number one target for Jalen Hurts the last 2 seasons, being minimized production-wise and seeing the ball?
Well,
One
yeah,
thing
that's a problem.
effective last season was the fact that they were able to get these check downs, get these chunk downs, which then again, we talk about the tush push play, which at this point, I'm tired of hearing about. It is going to drive me insane. I truly think it should be banned, but not because of the fact that the Eagles are successful with it. It's, I worry about the injury perspective about pushing the pile, and it's pushing the pile in general, rather if it's the tush push or somebody coming from behind, because I've seen it so many times this season, and now 3 times this season, I've seen someone get hurt from it, thankfully not severely, but we're due for one. But that's besides the point. Back to Dallas Goedert, to me, is the key. I don't want to say the key to that offense, but he's the key to getting chunk yardage along with your running back, DeAndre Swift. Now, next week against Miami, who's not one of the better defenses in the league and is not one of the good run defenses in the league, you're going to have chances to do that. But to me, and I'm going to say the same thing about another team, might I add, that also lost this week, tying into the 49ers point. Last season for the 49ers, George Kittle stank the first 8 weeks of the season. The last 9 weeks, he was spectacular. The 49ers began rolling when Kittle began rolling. This year, Purdy has looked great, right? But the Browns held George Kittle to 1 target, 1 catch for 1 measly yard last week. And what happened? Injuries, not timely, of course, right? McCaffrey goes down, Deebo Samuel goes down. That team ends up being in trouble, and George Kittle's essentially locked down, and that offense is locked down. My point is that when you look at the 49ers situation and the Eagles, What is it? They got a lot of pressure. They couldn't get to those main checkdowns. If the Eagles want to be successful, they've got to get Dallas Goedert more involved. And the same thing with Kittle. It cannot happen for the 49ers as well, which is why I'm truly happy, to be honest with you. I'm not worried about the Eagles. I think they're going to be just fine. I like their defense. I like the 49ers defense, of course, too. But I am worried that defenses are going to look and see how the 49ers got locked down this past week, and they're going to start picking stuff out of Shanahan's offense. Because the big thing about this Shanahan, right? He's very creative. He likes doing things out of the ordinary, very similar to what's going on in Miami, but not as much speed oriented, but more of, technicality oriented. My worry is that this team plays long drives, milks clock, and so on, doesn't really score a lot of points like Miami Dolphins offense does, right? So if teams can just hold in the field goal, for example, the Giants were a play away from being San Francisco. Let's be honest with you. They really were. If they just got to stop, they're in that game. And that's a team that's struggling this year. And there's a lot of teams this year that have been a play away from making a difference against the 49ers. I'm not saying the 49ers aren't good, but the point is the fact that I'd be more worried about them because as the more they continue to scheme, the more they get to figure it out. Whereas I think it's a lot harder to stop a mobile quarterback like Jalen Hurts when there's so much more of a dynamic, and might I add, a much better offensive line, regardless of injuries, that can really help the situation.
Yeah, I agree with you there on a lot of that. Let's talk about the Giants because you mentioned them. They got hosed this week. They really did. Tyrod Taylor played about as well as you could have expected from Tyrod Taylor given the situation. Giants were banged up. They played a tough game against Buffalo, and they were able to quiet Josh Allen for the most part. But the Bills walking away victorious, and the Giants are 1-5. And now remember, they only lost 6 games all of last year. So they are now 1-5. Daniel Jones missed the last game with a neck injury. How do you evaluate the Giants through 6 weeks?
I mean, last week was the first actual week we saw defense really nice overall, start to finish in a game. A lot of that, I honestly think, I'm going to give, a lot of credit overall for the whole defensive core. We'd have to imagine Dable had some idea of what he was going to see offensively that really ultimately ended up helping out defensively. But for the offensive line, I mean, I'm glad Justin Pugh is back and he's a Giant. He looked great in the offensive guard position. He's not naturally a left tackle, but after getting beat the first drive or so, he started to really find his rhythm straight off the couch, as he likes to say, and ended up making some real good plays. Overall, for the Giants against the team that led led the league in sacks of the Buffalo Bills, I'd say I'm pretty happy, regardless of the fact that we lost that game. Was it pass interference in the end zone, Darrell Waller? Yes, but it looks like for the moment the Giants are going to get Daniel Jones back this week. He practiced today. Do I believe he's 100% healthy? Absolutely not. But with that being said, Daniel Jones is 5-1 or 5. What is it? 5-1-1, 5 or whatever, 4-1-1, whatever it is. Point is, he has a very good career against Washington Commanders, and I believe this team can score touchdowns now with the offensive line it has. But I liked that the Giants made personnel changes. I liked how they made adjustments in the Buffalo game, and I think it's going to pay dividends in Washington. I truly do think, I'm not saying the Giants are going to turn around and be spectacular like the Lions last year off an awful start, but I think we're going to start seeing much more competent football out of the New York Giants. And I genuinely do not view the team as a one-win team. It's just offensive line play. Darius Slayton, by the way, impressive down the seam as he typically is. But the one that I just want to give a lot of love to, obviously getting back to seeing Saquon Barkley last week and finding his confidence as the game went on. But how about Wan'Dale Robinson? Nobody is talking about this guy. He's playing so good in the slot for the Giants, making some catches, extending plays. That is a guy that I want to see moving forward because I truly do think he has the capability of being the Giants' number one receiver on this team. I'm glad he's back, and I really wish they gave him a lot more love. But I overall view this Giants team still better than Washington, and I really do think we have a win coming this week. We're due for it. But there's a lot of potential moving forward. And if I can move to my Jets point very quickly, because
I
I
do
know I'm
just, before you get to that, I just want to say Wan'Dale Robinson did not practice today because of a knee issue. So the
that's
Giants have
really funny.
15 people on the injury report still. It's not pretty. They're in a bad
But
spot heading into this week.
middle of the week, Dable has kind of managed players and kind of gave them a day off, which again, when you've had as many injuries have had the Giants had, and I don't know why this happens every year in New York sports. We talk about the Mets, we talk about the Yankees, the Giants this year. It's like you touch the field, you're hurt. It just is what it is. Offensively, of course, you expect Daniel Jones to get hurt, to get protection, but everybody in the line's getting hurt. Receiving wise, not as much. Darren Waller, by the way, needs to do a much better job, but that's another conversation for another time. But it just is what it is, health wise for the Giants, and you just gotta hope they mesh. But regardless of the Jets, you mentioned 3-3 start, right? The Giants gonna have to play the Jets when they come back from the bye in 2 weeks. Zach Wilson has done an excellent job. He outdid Patrick Mahomes in Sunday Night Football. He has done a good job of earning the respect of, I think, the general fan that did not like Zach Wilson. But with that being said, I really do think the Jets do a disservice to themselves. Firmly believing that Zach Wilson's going to be the quarterback that gets them through the hump if Aaron Rodgers comes back, which again is a big if. I truly think he can come back and will come back because he's Aaron frickin' Rodgers. The debates I'm hearing is ridiculous of, oh, well, what if Zach Wilson plays so good that they get to the playoffs and they have a lot of faith in Zach Wilson and want him to play over Aaron Rodgers? That, to me, that scenario doesn't happen regardless of Zach Wilson. That didn't happen with Peyton Manning in 2015 when the Denver Broncos won the Super Bowl against the Carolina Panthers. They moved on from Brock Osweiler, who looked very, very good.
Mm-hmm.
That season and ultimately played a struggling Peyton Manning that led them to a Super Bowl. Granted, didn't lead them to the Super Bowl victory, but led them to the Super Bowl regardless of the playoffs. To me, obviously, we don't know what's going to happen with Kirk Cousins. Doesn't look like he's going to waive his no trade clause. But I would argue this point, and you may disagree with me. I would argue if the Jets even had Daniel Jones in the backfield under center, this team would have looked so much better than the Super Bowl caliber team. They are so good defensively. You don't get defenses this good this often. This defense has kept them in the game week in, week out. And don't get me wrong, Dak is doing just a good enough of a job to win games. But listen, 17 points per game or whatever it is, because I'm pretty sure it's under 20 for the Jets, is not gonna get the job done to win you a Super Bowl. An average quarterback like Kirk Cousins will get this team to the promised land. I promise you that. The Jets need to do themselves a service and get a mid-tier quarterback. Even Jimmy Garoppolo. Jimmy Garoppolo could carry this team to the Super Bowl. This team is this good, and I know I said at the start of the season because I thought they'd have Aaron Rodgers, but this team is this good now that this team could be elevated to Super Bowl potential if they just get the right guy under center. So to me, if it's a second or a third round pick for a mid-tier QB, I'm fine with it. But the Jets got to get somebody. You cannot settle with Zach Wilson regardless of how good he's doing.
And he's really not doing that good. He made some plays. I feel like the media is hyping him up way too much. Week 2 was really, I watched a whole drive against New England where he was able to move the ball down the field. And it got ridiculous with Tony Romo just being like, Jim, this is the best drive we've seen from Zach Wilson ever. It's like he's throwing little 4-yard slant patterns to Garrett Wilson. Like any quarterback can do that. The fact that
this is the problem too with Zach Wilson. He doesn't throw well down the seams. That's the problem. So you mentioned slant routes. For the reason why defenses, for example, Bill Belichick back in his rookie year was so successful against Zach Wilson, even Sam Darnold, is the fact that Zach Wilson narrows down the field. Because if he can't make moves with his feet to get a throw on a run or make a play happen like he had in college, he just zones in middle of the field. He can't look down the sidelines. I don't know what it is for him in terms of trying to set up a play, but he becomes very predictable. And when you're able to tighten up your defense, that makes it much easier, which is the problem. Yeah, great drives, 4-yard slant or whatever, but eventually That gets locked down as the drive continues on, which is why the Jets are settling the field goals. And the other thing, not to be critical of the Jets even further, but why are we not giving the ball to Breece Hall more? He's off his snap count now. Let's just give it to your biggest playmaker. Breece Hall right now is carrying that offense. And until Garrett Wilson gets a competent quarterback, which for the record, I still argue Garrett Wilson is a top 5 receiver in the league, maybe even better if he has an actual quarterback under center. I think there's a lot of production there. I'm telling you, the Jets offense has potential. They just need one change. But I'm sorry, go back to your point.
Well, yeah, I mean, you're right there. You're spot on. Garrett Wilson is still getting 7, 8 catches for 60, 70 yards every game with Zach Wilson as his quarterback. So that's really the whole point there. Zach Wilson is not playing well. The Jets need to move on from him, in my opinion, if they seriously want to make a deep run. But the defense and Breece Hall and Garrett Wilson are carrying them right now. And credit to the Jets to be sitting 3-3 after what happened with Aaron Rodgers. Now let's go to baseball, because there's been a lot of really, I'd say, stupid debates that have been going on over the last few days, particularly from Braves and Dodgers fans. So last episode, we previewed the Major League Baseball postseason, and as was the case last year, the playoffs did not go as planned. The Dodgers laid an egg in the NLDS for the second straight year. The Braves laid an egg in the NLDS for the second straight year. And the Orioles, the best team in the American League all year, proved that they were inexperienced in the playoffs, and Texas swept the floor with them in 3 games. So the Braves are gone, the Dodgers are gone, the Orioles are gone, Tampa's gone. Those are the 4 best teams in the regular season, and you're left with Arizona making it to the NLCS after they couldn't really be streaky at all. I mean, they were streaky and they couldn't put anything together all season consistently. And then I guess they're on a hot streak coming in. Obviously, they dropped the last 2 games. We'll talk about that in a couple of minutes. You get Philadelphia, who finds ways. You got Texas, who's got a great roster, and Houston, the one consistent moving on. But a lot of people have been saying, oh, the playoff format is broken right now because these teams are getting so much extra layoff because they added 3 games into the wild card round instead of 1. And that now the regular season apparently doesn't matter. These are just salty fans saying this. Completely ridiculous. I like this current format. I think the format was worse that you went into a situation where you had a 162 game season, and if you couldn't win your division, if there was one super team in your division, you were stuck playing a 1-game playoff, and a sport that is built on 3 or 4 game series shouldn't be settled by 1 game. I much prefer this situation where you have a best of 3 series, where at least there's more of a sample size. Yeah, upsets are still going to happen if a team catches fire for a couple of days, but it simulates the regular season more because you're getting 3-game series and then 5-game series, and you get 3 and 4 game series all regular season. So the Braves, if you can't win in Philadelphia, if you can't beat the Phillies, I'm sorry. And, you know, you changed your philosophy too. The Braves had their whole layoff last year. There's no reason why you can't be playing simulated games for those few days, which is what the Braves did. They even had fans coming into the park in Atlanta to watch them play simulated games. So they were getting that practice in. The layoff is not that big of a deal. And look at the Houston Astros. They've had the layoff the last 2 years, and then they cruised handily through the ALDS back-to-back seasons. It's not that it's a disadvantage and every team crumbles. So this is just a couple of fan bases that are really off their rockers and just upset and annoyed that their teams can't perform in the playoffs. And the Braves, besides 2021, have not been able to perform in the postseason over the last 30 years. And the Dodgers, besides 2020, a 60-game season and an asterisk championship, will not go anywhere with the current pitching situation, with the health that's there, and with Dave Roberts as their manager. It's as simple as that. So want to get your thoughts on this whole debate about the playoff format.
Yeah, I mean, well, if you adjust it to the modern NFL playoff system, what does that mean? It means that in the regular season, I'm not saying it doesn't really matter, but when you have more than 50% of your league making a playoff, because remember, Major League Baseball, 30 teams as compared to 32 teams in the NFL, that does you no justice, right? So I feel the modern playoff system is absolutely fine with how it works. You have your 3 division winners, your 3 wild card winners, and you go from there. I agree in full-heartedly in regards to the wild card round. best of three. You are a game of series. There's no reason that a one-game playoff, which might I add too, not only does it disservice the fact that if you have one fluke game, you're out, but it also does a disservice in this regard of the fact that you know how much of a disadvantage teams that played the one-game wild card were at heading into the DS because they knew they would be down their number one pitcher or so on because they wouldn't get enough days rest. And on top of it, if you had to play game 163, you barely have any days rest. You may even have to play the next day to play a wild card game with how much time is off from the end of the regular season. Now, if you're a Braves fan, I understand why you're frustrated, but on the same time, your team wasn't healthy. That's the other fact of the matter that nobody's talking about. That team's rotation was a mess. The Philadelphia Phillies played great baseball when it mattered. And again, on paper, their offense is stacked. They are a World Series caliber team, whether you like it or not, and they simply played better baseball. Your MVP didn't show up. Ronald Acuna, what happened? Barely produced this postseason. And on top of it, too, your big power slugger, Matt Olson, was not very productive either. So when you look at it on paper again, just like how I viewed about the New York Yankees, just because you hit for power doesn't mean you can hit for average and get those hits when it matters. And the Braves did not do that at all when it came down to the nitty gritty against the Philadelphia Phillies. The only team, by the way, I believe, based on my predictions I made with Alec in the final four in the NLCS and ALCS, is the Houston Astros. The Houston Astros, let's be honest, they've been a little bit underwhelming in the ALCS to open up. A little bit disappointed by that. But when you look at the Dodgers, I mean, what else is there to say? That team is not as good as what it was 2-3 years ago. I viewed what they were doing was generational, constantly changing talent. It was something I aspired to be. They didn't really do that this year. And granted, the debate about should Mookie Betts be MVP again, my point is this: the fact of the matter for the Dodgers, it's the same exact scenario when you look at things in the nitty gritty, is the fact that you had opportunities and you didn't come up clutch when it mattered. And on top of it, too, the Diamondbacks had motivation. They're a young team wanting to prove themselves. They find themselves in the NLCS for the first time, I think, since 2005?
Oh, 7.
Oh, 07, sorry, that's right. So it's been 16 years since they were last in the NLCS. That team looks young and exciting. Unfortunately, looks like that momentum's deflating a little bit. But I think it's a good thing for baseball with the playoff system we have. Be as salty as you want. I don't think it could get any better and more fair than what we currently have. And I'm happy with it. And the other thing I'm happy with is the fact that the regular rule of extra innings, which I don't think we've had really. Have we had it yet the postseason this year?
No.
We had it last season with the Guardians in the race, but I don't think we had it this year to this point. So overall, I like the fact that the extra inning runner on second rule goes away because again, it's back to natural baseball, and that's what we should be playing in the postseason. And to me, naturally, a best of three series to open up a wild card game, regardless if it may kill your momentum if you're a team that's on a bye, so be it. I think it's as fair as it can be, and I'm happy with how Major League Baseball is. And outside of the Philadelphia Phillies maybe winning the World Series, I'll be happy with how this season goes. So
Yeah, and I'm happy as a Met fan. I'd prefer the Phillies over the Atlanta Braves based on how things have
I'm
gone the
rooting
last
for
couple
the
of years.
make the World Series. I'm rooting for the Rangers if they make the World Series. I'm hoping the Diamondbacks don't stun the Phillies because I cannot stand the city of Philadelphia. I just can't. I can't. After they clinched, ooh, I was off my rocker with the Luton. Let's just put it like that. I can't stand the city, man. I just can't. I don't get how people like Philadelphia. I
Tim,
don't.
read your own shirt. Get over it. Get over it. Come on. Get
But
over it. But
I
anyway, the Phillies, I will say this. That environment at Citizens Bank Park is the best baseball environment, and I think the hardest to play in and the biggest home field advantage we've seen probably since when the Blue Jays were good around 2014, 2015. Teams just cannot succeed there. Pitchers are frazzled. And, you made your whole argument about power and hitting for power, and you also got to hit for average. The Phillies are just straight up mashing and hitting for power, and they're still finding a way, but it's because, like you said, their lineup is so loaded. When you have Trey Turner, Kyle Schwarber, Bryce Harper, Nick Castellanos, all hitting dingers consistently, you're in a good position. And this is a team that lost Rhys Hoskins, who was one of their best players down the stretch to get them to the World Series last year before the season even started. Zach Wheeler still irks me that the Mets did not bring him back when he clearly wanted to come back and was waiting on an offer from the Wilpons and just didn't get one in 2019. He's become one of the best postseason pitchers over these last couple of years. He's consistently out there putting up quality starts and is unfazed by the moment. Aaron Nola, who was iffy in the postseason last year, has been locked in so far. The Phillies pitching has been incredible. And for Arizona, like I started to allude to a few minutes ago, when they started out this year, it was back and forth. It was topsy-turvy. They'll win 9 straight, then they'll go cold for a week. Then they'll win 6 more. Then they'll drop 2 straight series. They just got on a hot streak. They found a way to beat the Brewers and the Dodgers, but now when push comes to shove, the Phillies are the better baseball team, and I think the Phillies are going to close this out. Houston's a little bit of a surprise. We've seen them come back from deficits before. We've seen them win on the road before when it's mattered, especially in some of those Yankee series over the past few years. This is a team that's as battle-tested as any. This is their 7th straight ALCS appearance, which is crazy.
Isn't it crazy that they're getting dominated by former Yankees?
I know. Jordan Montgomery, Nate Eovaldi, and then you've got former Mets on the team that haven't even pitched. Max Scherzer will be pitching tonight in Game 3. Jacob deGrom is just there. I hope Jacob deGrom succeeds. I'm not rooting for Max Scherzer at all. So that's why I'm really torn about the Texas Rangers. But right now, Texas is up 2-0. Their offense is hitting. You got Evan Carter coming out of nowhere. He's been really good. Jonah Heim, Josh Jung, of course, Seager, who's been a great postseason performer his entire career. Texas is looking for real. I think Houston makes this a series, but I think the Rangers are closing this out. I think we're on a crash course for Rangers against the Phillies in the World Series. And Mets fans like myself having to see Max Scherzer against Zach Wheeler potentially in a World Series matchup, that's going to sting. That really will. But I don't know if you think the Astros might be able to come back, but right now, I just think it's going to come down to Texas and Philly.
Well, again, I'm rooting for whoever's in the AL if Philly wins the series regardless. But I mean,
we're aware.
Be huge because again, you think all the way back to when they had Josh Hamilton and that team looked so dang good, and you thought them and, for example, even the Detroit Tigers were just so capable of winning a World Series. It just quite never got to that. And I think for the Rangers, it would be huge considering all the struggles they'd been through the past few seasons, to turn what was, let's be honest, a falling apart franchise into a rebuild of buying and purchasing and really refusing to settle down. This team this year constantly stepped up to the occasion, made trades when they could. They were the first team that made the big move. Aroldis Chapman was the first big piece to quote unquote go this year, and the Rangers from the get-go were not complacent with anything, and it has to do with a big product of them making big signings and understanding what they needed overall. So again, I'm rooting for the Rangers, but man, I just don't know if anybody can stop the Philadelphia Phillies. I'm going to be honest with you. That offense is just too good right now. They get to early leads, which is the big thing. They hit well early, and if you cannot match with that offense, which the Braves did not the Braves, excuse me, the Diamondbacks did last series in the DS. To be honest with you, very well, that they're not doing in this series very well at all. It to me is a little bit upsetting. But I think that the Astros are definitely going to fight back later on in this series, but I just don't know. I don't think they have it in them to beat the Texas Rangers, who, let's be honest, at the start of the season was the best team in the West. And on paper, in my utter opinion, at the end of this season, is a super team in the West right now. Arguably, maybe the best team in Major League Baseball on paper.
Let's finish with the NBA. Next episode, we're going to do our comprehensive NBA preview. That's probably going to come out Monday or Tuesday, but there's a storyline, and I think something needs to be said here because of what just happened with Philadelphia today. So James Harden has been vocal that he doesn't want to be a 76er anymore, even though he demanded to go there after leaving the Nets, and he demanded to go to the Nets after leaving Houston, and he's calling Daryl Morey a liar during the offseason, and then he shows up, and he's there, and then started this past weekend, he's just not at practice anymore. And it's like Ben Simmons all over again. And the Sixers were going to give him the space to give an explanation, but clearly he doesn't want to be there. But this is becoming ridiculous. And it's almost, at this point, I'd say that James Harden at this stage is more of a detriment to teams than Kyrie Irving. Because Kyrie Irving has his problems, has his crazy views, and can be a PR nightmare for any organization. But at least when he's out there on the court and his head's in the game, he shows up and he balls, and he can still play at the top of his game. James Harden is well past his prime at this point. Did not look the same with Philadelphia as he did back in the days with Houston and even with Brooklyn. In that Sixers Celtics series back in May, he was hit or miss, had 2 good games and 4 really bad ones in that series. And Harden cannot be counted on and just gives up. And he's willing to just give up and force his way out of situations. The whole Nets debacle and everything falling apart would not have happened if James Harden wasn't the one who asked out first, and that's what caused all the chaos. And now he gets to go to Philadelphia, is where he wanted to be, and he says, oh, I want to spend so much time here, and now he immediately wants to get out of there. And if he wants to go back to Houston, first of all, if the Rockets take him back at this point just to try to sell some tickets is crazy. You're a team that's in a rebuild with all this young talent right now. You got Thompson, you got Green, you got Sengun. Let those guys play. Don't let James Harden take those minutes. That's ridiculous. So Harden at this point has just burnt so many bridges. And even though he's not some crazy conspiracy theorist like Kyrie Irving, I think having Harden on your roster is worse than having Kyrie Irving at this point.
Hey, real quick, didn't the Rockets just trade for Victor Oladipo?
I believe so. They've
So,
got a lot. Yeah.
so it's like from a depth perspective, that also makes it a little bit harder for them to even want to consider getting James Harden. But overall, and by the way, Rockets are a little bit sneaky this offseason. I like what they're doing. But I just think it's embarrassing what James Harden is doing. Because he just seems to be a nightmare everywhere he goes. Nobody can work with him. Nobody can get along with him. And it's funny because you had the same narrative about a different guy who has proven to be a leader now really over the last 2 seasons, and that was Russell Westbrook, right? And of course, Kyrie Irving as well. But overall, Russell Westbrook, even granted one very difficult season in LA, right? Showed that he has the capabilities of being a leader going to other places like he did with the Wizards. James Harden just has the capabilities of proving that he's a one-dimensional loser. Let's be honest with you. When I give you that honest-to-God comparison, and I know it sounds insane, but I compared it to baseball, I look at James Harden. I look at Bryce Harper the same way. They complain about nothing. They don't show up in the clutch. They may hit a couple big home runs. They may look appealing on paper, but then when they get to the big time, when it matters, aka the World Series for Bryce Harper, what happens? He ends up losing because he's a loser mentality. And that's the point with James Harden. What ticks me off a little bit is that he is a loser mentality player. If something doesn't go his way, it's instantly, okay, I'm done. I'm out. I don't want to be here. And it's the littlest bit. Listen, you're making so much money. You're an offensive player. You don't even play defense. Let's be honest. He's not a good defender. He was a good defender for 1 year, his last year, and with the Rockets, and that was it. He looks washed up. Yeah, he may produce a couple points per game, but when he destroys your team chemistry and he pulls a Ben Simmons and wants to show up to practice and doesn't, dude, to trade him to the Guangdong Tigers at this point, ni hao, as Shaq likes to say, this is abysmal. The 76ers need to get rid of him. It's just as simple as that. Release him, do whatever, get rid of him, because it's only going to hurt your franchise further. And what was a team that is coming off a player off an MVP season of Joel Embiid, and you look at this team and say, hey, it could be better, overall, and in terms of being potential, that's the last person you want on the team. And again, let's be honest. I want to compare the Nets situation one more time. What happened leading to the Nets ultimately trading away everybody last season? It was the optimism of what was Kyrie Irving going to do. And a lot of the focus was centered around him and not what the basketball team was actually doing. They ended up playing better once they traded everybody away. I think the Sixers would be so much better if they just let James Harden go so they can focus on what this team needs. Because A, it would take a financial burden off. B, even if you get nothing back, mentally, it would be such less of a distraction for those players in a city that, let's be honest, wants to win a championship, just like how they're doing in other sports. But the Sixers seems to be the only team in the city, because I'm not going to count the NHL, but the only team in the city that's getting held back.
Yeah, and one last point I want to make. Tyrese Maxey is getting overshadowed because James Harden's there. Tyrese Maxey is a stud and he's going to be a consistent, I think, perennial all-star. I think he's already top 25 player in the NBA and he's showcased it last year. And in a situation, if Harden is out of the picture, he can easily slot right in as Joel Embiid's number 2. But we'll continue to dive into the picture on our next episode. Again, NBA season preview coming next week, either Monday or Tuesday. Probably going to have some more clarity then too about if Philly or Texas are heading to the World Series or if Houston and Arizona can make those championship series. But that'll be it here for Sports Speak Live episode 152. Reminder, you can follow us on X at Sports Speak Live, and we're always sponsored by SeatGeek. $20 off your first purchase at checkout with promo code SportsSpeak, all caps, one word. But until next time, I'm Eddie Kalegi.
And I'm Tim Moore.
Signing off as Sports Speak. Enjoy the rest of your week.